So hello everyone. For today's expert session, we have Prayaag Akbar sir, and I'm sure that many of you in the audience already know about him and his books, but I'll still read out the bio for everyone. Prayaag Akbar is the author of the novels Mother India and Leila. Leila won the Crossword Jury Prize and the Tata Literature First Book Award. That novel was also translated into Hindi, Marathi, and Turkish, and was the basis of a popular Netflix series. Prayag teaches creative writing at Kriya University now. Welcome, Prayag sir, and thank you so much for taking out an hour from your Sunday.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's just Prayaag, by the way. There's no need for the search. You can just call me Prayaag. And thank you and for having me. And thank you all for coming to the session. I'm really happy to see so many people here.
Yeah. So I was just telling you that I've read both of your novel, Leela and Mother India. And since in this community, a lot of people are working on their first novels, first drafts.
Mm.
And I've seen that in both the novels, you've started with the characters. Like in Leila, how Shalini and her husband is in front of the wall. And then in also in Mother India, it is Mayank and he's at his workplace. Both start with the characters and how in their heads they are. But as first time writers, we often get stuck on how to start or what should our first chapter be like. So my first question would be like, what do you think is most important to keep in mind when writing that first chapter or the first draft?
So I think when you're working on the first draft, so this is a very good question because first of all, it's very well noticed that both the novels actually have this kind of emphasis on showing you the character right at the start. They do start at action points, I would say. Both there's something happening in both those first chapters, but yeah, my focus is always on the character, and I tell my students the same thing, which is start understand who you're writing about. When we read, when just think of you don't have to only think of my work, or just think of your favorite writers, that your favorite books that you've read. um when we read to see another person. We want to see another life. We want to see more than anything else. We are reading to get a glimpse into another way of living and another way of, the challenges someone faces. That is truly what we identify with in fiction. And that is what we learn from in fiction. And that is what the reader craves. If I ask you about your favorite book or your favorite novel or your favorite short story, you might tell me, you would automatically tell me about the protagonist. You'll tell me about the main character, if that's the character that really stayed with you. And you'll tell me about, obviously what happens to the protagonist, but it will be the moments that stay with you are not the ins and outs of narrative. It's not like, oh yeah, she went here and this character went here and then did this and then that. That's not really important. What you remember are the moments that make you that resonate with you, that make you feel something. And that inevitably happens around character development. So I tell all my students, like, think of your character and try and make them as real as possible. Think of whatever the challenges are. Like, you have to think, when you think of your character, you're also thinking of what's going to happen in the novel, because automatically, because what is interesting about this character? How do we make this character someone? Because starting with the character is one thing, but you have to get your reader to stay with that character for the next 200 pages. Another thing I tell my students is, the work of fiction is very complicated, because you know someone can put down a book any moment. As soon as you come across a bad paragraph, or a paragraph that feels fake, or that feels flawed, or that feels unreal, you just put down a book. It's so easy to put down a book. And so it's our job as writers to really keep the reader with you at all times. And to do that is by creating a really authentic portrait of a person, of a character, of a person. I had one student a few years ago who, you know, she, they wanted to write about an inanimate object. And, they're very young, like most of the students are 19 or 20. I don't know if there are people that young in this group, but, some of my students are like 20, 21, and they wanted to write about an inanimate character, like a child's pencil box. And, it just becomes so difficult if you're not thinking about a person and a personality and a true experience. So just, the starting point of your story should be always who is my person, who is the character, and what is happening to them that makes them interesting, that makes their life interesting. And there you have like the bits of a story. I mean, there's a lot to this. I even break up my course. I teach it, at university. I teach this course and creative writing course, and I break it up into three kind of modules. And it's a character, plot, and world building. And I always start with character because I say that's the most important thing. It's like you can come to the plot later, but just start with who this person is, why they're interesting, why they're fascinating. Like,
And on that note, like we will move on to the next part, like your modules. Um, we will move on to the world building now. Like
okay.
with Leela, right from the beginning, I felt there was a foreboding atmosphere of the novel, especially because of the setting, the walls, and it gave very similar vibes to other dystopian books that I was reading, like 1984 or Handmaid's Tale, even where like the protagonist was searching for their daughter, like Shalini. And I wanted to ask how, your world building process was different for Leila and then for Mother India, because Mother India is set in a contemporary Delhi, and the happenings of the Himalayan region that are happening. So how was it different for both the books?
Well, a dystopic fiction necessarily requires, some very careful world building because you're writing about an imaginary place, right? So you have to construct that world. So you have to be very careful in how you construct it. The thing that I did was I actually tried to make it as realistic as possible. There is a butterfly effect in fiction. If you have if you change too much, you know then the whole world falls out of order very quickly. So if you try and do too much in your world, so in Leila, the only thing I really changed was I had these 60 foot, 60 feet high walls all across the city. The city was divided into these walls, and just that one thing had all these ramifications for how people lived, how people divided themselves, how people married. All these things have consequences. And I started with that premise, and then it led to a lot of different kind of ramifications. And so you have to be very careful in your world building, but with so when you're writing a dystopian fiction, you have to really sort of really plan and think very carefully about what you're doing, where your character is, um, with even a very simple kind of dystopic fiction, and not simple. Cormac McCarthy doesn't write any simple books, but there's a very famous book called The Road. I don't know if any of you have read it or are aware of it. It's a wonderful novel, and it just deals with a boy and his father walking down this kind of dystopic road, and they're trying to, they don't know where you don't know really where they're going. They're just trying to find safety and peace. And it's like, even it's just the way they're being attacked from left and right, basically all along their journey. That's the whole novel. But even that, a novel like that has very careful world building, because you have to think about how society ended up in this place, where it's going to go from here. All these things are important when you're thinking about world building in a dystopic fiction. In a realistic fiction, I mean, whatever what you call literary realism, which is my second novel, I tried very hard to, it's about Delhi, which is a city I grew up in. I don't live in anymore, but I'm very familiar with Delhi. That whole neighborhood around Vasant Kunj and all of that was like, my playground for a long time when I was a kid. So I feel very intimately connected to the people, to the way people talk. I think I have some sense of the cadence of uh, that kind of Haryanvi Delhi hybrid that is spoken along that belt in Mahipalpur and Mehroli and all of that. And, because and so I tried to pay attention to what that place was like when I was growing up and what it's like today. for me, that was the arc. And I wanted to write about Mayank is born at a time when Mahipalpur is still relatively quiet and relatively village-like. It's still relatively. Now it is something completely different. I don't know if who's familiar with Delhi here, but it's a completely different place now. And I wanted to be able to capture that. So it involved me doing a lot of ground research, seeing how the place has changed, walking amongst the people, frequenting shops and things like that. But I think they were different, it's a different kind of challenge to write about a place that actually exists. It was my first time doing it, and I don't know if I was successful or not. I hope I was creating a sense of that place.
Yeah, it was really, and the constant like mention of also what is happening outside of Delhi, even that was very relevant to what happens now. We are somewhere, but we're also constantly thinking of what's happening, elsewhere.
Absolutely. Well, it's one of the effects of social media, right? We kind of
Right.
lead these dual lives, and my book is also a lot very much to do with social
Yeah.
media. And uh I social media creates that effect where you have this kind of you're in your sort of physical space, but you're also floating off in another space that's
Right.
directed by the algorithm, and your thoughts are somewhere else. And so it's that was one of the things I wanted to kind of show, with Shalini, I'm calling her, with Nisha. Shalini is my protagonist of Leila. With Nisha, who's the protagonist, she comes from Uttarakhand, very close to the Himalayan Writing Retreat, actually. Very close to Mukteshwar, was where I thought that she would be from. I mean, in my head, she came from a place uh, around Bhimtal or Nokuchetal, something like that. I didn't name the place, but that's where I had her coming from. And she has this kind of I mean, she has this gaze at her home because she's a migrant to Delhi. She lives in Delhi. She works in Mahipalpur. She works in Vasant Kunj at the mall. She lives in Mahipalpur, and she has this gaze um, at home, and the things that are happening there. And social media, it's a lovely thing actually. It enables that. I see it, where I live now. There's a lot, construction labor can keep in touch. Well, not just keep in touch with their homes, but see what's happening in terms of, just see a very physical lived reality of their homes. And so we have so many migrants in India, there's so many people who live outside their their place of birth. And it's for me, it's one of the things that's very powerful and useful about social media.
Yeah. So now coming to the next question, I've also noticed that in both the books, the prose is very sharp and direct. The sentences are very short and full of impact.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's as if like any kind of fluff has been neatly cut out.
Wow.
On that note, I would love to know like what is your editing process is like.
First of all, thank you. That's a really big compliment. Like, I don't know if you can see, I have a portrait over here of that's J.M. Coetzee. He's one of my favorite writers. I learned a lot from him. And Cormac McCarthy is another writer I really admire. And these guys, they kind of specialize in these really powerful, really short, really terse sentences. And I like other styles of writing also. I'm a huge Ishiguro fan. He would never be accused of writing a terse sentence. But I think that with my own I do edit myself quite a lot, but I also have an amazing editor. My wife is one of my editors. She reads my stuff and she catches a lot of the fluff, as you said. And I have a great editor actually. My agent Shruti Devi is also my editor, and she's unbelievable. She's a real professional. She knows exactly uh, what is not working in fiction and what works. And she's taught me how to be able to tell the difference also over the years. We've been working together for a long time now. So I really kind of appreciate what she did. And then eventually the editor at HarperCollins, Rahul Soni, was also very good. But so I write around, for both novels, I've written like my process seems to be write two terrible drafts that don't work at all, and then the third draft somehow like something seems to work with that. I'm really hoping it doesn't happen to me again with the third novel, but like um at both times I've written two horrible kind of unreadable things, and then but sort of slowly making my way towards the final thing, the final draft. So I don't know. I'd be very curious to hear from the group about, how many people are working on second drafts or third drafts of the first ideas of their ideas. Like, because it is, there's no writer. I mean, now I know a lot of writers. When I was writing my first novel, I didn't know many novelists, but now I know a lot of novelists, and we all talk about this, the fact that, it's required. Like everyone does it. Foreign writers, Indian writers, everyone is kind of rewriting constantly. There's no getting away from it. And once you embrace it and understand it as crucial a part of the process as the initial writing, it's just part, it's like, it's part of what you have to do. So you might as well give it everything. There was a writer, I think you guys must know a writer called Zadie Smith. She has this process. She says that she'll write a full draft, and then she'll shut. I mean, she obviously prints it out or whatever, and then she put it in a drawer for, I think she said 1 month or 2 months or 6 months or something. She won't look at it. She will not allow herself to look at it, which I think is remarkable, self-control and discipline and all. But like I mean, there's something to be said for that. What I do is I actually go away to teach for 3 months, and then I try not to look at it during those 3 months. And then I come back, and when I'm home, I start working on the fiction again. So there is some,
Staying away.
yeah, just staying away, because your mind needs to reset and look at it objectively. Otherwise, we're too attached to the words, you're too attached to each thing, and you're like, wow, that's a really pretty sentence, or that's a really, even though it's not really relevant to the story, I've really, got some good writing down there. And I love that scene, or I've captured a moment from my past that I want to put into the novel. And you realize later that that's unnecessary, like, I want to get back at my ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend or whatever, like, and so I've written a scene about that. And, then you realize that you have to, so all that stuff, when you get some distance from your writing. So my tips for rewriting would be like, just get an outside pair of eyes, someone you really trust, someone whose opinion you trust. Don't ask like 10 people to read it. That's self-defeating, like they'll all give you different feedback. Find someone whose opinion you really trust, and listen to them. It's very hard to take feedback. It's really tough. When my agent, when Shruti emails me, I can't read the emails at first, like I know it's going to be really tough for me to read. And so like I just I steal I gear myself up to read it, and then I read it and I think about what she said and things like that. So get someone whose opinion you really trust, and then and also give yourself some time off. Work on another project, work on a short story, do some other work, anything. Read a great novel, and then come back to your work.
Yeah, that is something everybody should be doing if they're looking forward to editing their first drafts, I guess. Um, then going to the next question, I've also like read other interviews and where your book gets categorized under speculative fiction, at least Leila, and because of its Netflix adaptation, I think it appears more like a dystopian fiction.
Hmm.
But while working on the first draft of Leila, did you think of like what category would it be or what genre would it be? Do you think it helps in the structure of the plot if a writer tries to figure out the genre beforehand?
And I honestly, I don't really believe in genre that much, like in this idea of genre. I know it's really problematic because I teach at a university, and on the rest of the department are all like, they for an academic, genre is really important. It's crucial. Or publishers also think a lot about genre, but I don't think writers think that much about genre. We think about what we want to say. We think about who these people are that we want to write about. Like, we're not focused on like, am I writing a romance? There's the good novels have bits of everything, right? They will have something of, how could you put Tolstoy in a genre? Like, is he political fiction? Is he, is he real? Is he like literary realism? What is it? Like, I don't know. Or Kutsi or someone like that. I remember, when Leila came out, my opening, like sort of the book launch in Delhi was with Nilanjana Roy, who's another writer. I think you must know her. She's a wonderful lady, wonderful writer. She asked me this question at the sort of book launch, and I said, "What genre is this or whatever?" And I was like, like I think like the really good writers, they kind of like stride across genre. Like they can take in various things, various influences, and put out their own ideas. Be true to your ideas and don't worry so much. I think those are things mostly for publishers because they want to have like a certain number of romance books and a certain number of crime thrillers and a certain number of this and that. But of course, if you're doing something that if you're writing in a very specific genre, like crime thriller or like or like beach romance or something like that, then there are certain conventions that you might want to follow. But for me, I like books that like push lots of boundaries and challenge the reader also and challenge I mean, I'm just looking at my shelves around me and so many great books. You can't put into a genre, so that's what I feel. I definitely I didn't even know this term of dystopia actually. I mean I kind of heard of it, but that was something the publishers told me. Simon and Schuster told me about it. It was like, oh, you have this dystopic fiction. I was like, what? Like I wasn't clear about what it meant at all. And but again, you kind of pointed out to my influences. I definitely had read George Orwell many times. I mean, 1984 many times. I read Handmaid's Tale a couple of times when I was in school and college and so on. So like I love both those books. I love many there's a great book by Coetzee called The Life and Times of Michael Kay. That's like a masterclass in dystopic writing. But you can't. No one. I don't think anyone referred to him as a speculative fiction writer. Everyone's too scared of him probably to call him anything. But uh, uh, yeah, he's
So, you've been teaching creative writing at Kriya University. What do you think is the most common struggle you see among your students, and what would be your advice to get over it?
That's a really interesting question. The most common struggle, I would be, I don't think it would be right. I don't know if I would be able to identify, one thing over the other. That every student, every writer basically presents you like what but the way I work is like I treat each story on its merits, and then you have to like kind of like help them retool it, right? Help them rework it, make it into a workable fiction, see what they're doing wrong and or what in your opinion they're doing wrong, and try and help them get the story into a better place. So like I mean, some people struggle with world building, some people struggle with narrative. Some people are really good at narrative, but they don't want to do character development, And I keep telling them, I was like, no, like, just telling me X happened, then Y happened, then Z happened. Like, it's not real fiction, Like, you have to show me how the characters respond to these situations, what they're feeling. That is what we read fiction for, right? That sense of interiority. I remember hearing this at a lit fest before I'd ever published a book. It never occurred to me, but like a novel is the only uh, form of kind of storytelling that not the only form, but like it's the best at it that allows you to sit inside your character's mind. Like some films try and do it and all of that, but a novel takes you inside the reader. Sorry, inside the protagonist. You're literally sitting, you're hearing their thoughts, you're going along with them as they experience the world. And the way they see the world is the way you're seeing the world. And if we remember that, like the novel is about interiority and not about, cars flying or whatever, like things happening here, there, but just it's actually about interiority and how to develop a story alongside that. So, I would get told that my stories are very political and things like that. But I'm very glad, Pratyusha, that you pointed out that like they're very character focused. Like I like to focus on characters actually more than anything else.
Okay. Most of these writers here in the community are also looking forward to publishing their books, even though they're working on first drafts.
Hmm.
So, what would you like to say about the publishing process in India or abroad? Once the manuscript is ready for everyone here.
Um, it's a challenge like everything else. It's challenging. It's very tough to get your novel published. It's very tough to get a good agent to represent you. I don't know how many of you guys have agents now. You need an agent. When I first published Leila, or when I first started thinking about Leila, I think it wasn't. I don't think it was required for publishers to. Indian publishers didn't require you to have an agent. You could just email them in a manuscript. But now there's too many manuscripts being sent in, and the publishers are kind of inundated with uh, um, things. So they require an agent. And so again, like go step by step, finish the novel, like finish what you're writing, uh, all that other stuff. That's the kind of, from the outside, it seems glamorous to have an agent and, exciting and all of that, but it's really not very glamorous at all. It's, there's someone who can help you. And you have to think about it that way. They're not, at the end of the day, they're also your agent. They have many writers that they need to work with. So it's not like, uh, it's not like a Hollywood movie or something where this agent is doing all these cool things for you and getting your holidays and things like that. None of that happens. It's mostly a very professional, functional relationship. And so uh, I would say first focus on writing the best story you can. Get a good rep, get a good agent, someone you trust, you can work with. They will know which publishing houses to send it to. They will be able to evaluate. If it's a good agent, they'll be able to evaluate the manuscript for what it is and see like, okay, this is something that this editor at HarperCollins would really love, or this is something that this person at Picador is going to just freak out about, or whatever. That's what a really good agent would do. And but they all send it out. They send it out across to a whole bunch of publishing houses. Then you see who's interested, who's most interested. If there are multiple people, there's an auction that happens um, for your book. Then you go abroad. You try and get. I have an agent. My agent here has an agent abroad, so she kind of sells my book, or she sold my Leila over there. We haven't sent it out in the UK uh, for Mother India yet. We need to do that. I'm working on an edit. Actually, I'm working on another edit. So I don't want to for the UK, so and for the sort of global thing. So I haven't been able to finish it. But with Lila, it was kind of seamless because they wanted it Faber and Faber published it in the UK and actually all over the world. And they just liked the book. I think they wanted to do a dystopian fiction or something, and they liked what they read. So I was very lucky there. But yeah, it's a tough thing. The publishing part is tough, and the problem is like, even after everything is they buy the book. Say you have the dream run where they buy the book and give you some money you're happy with, and the money is very poor. Also, I should tell you all. No, I mean, I suppose there are there are writers who sell like crazy amounts, like Chetan Bhagat or this. I met someone at the last at Jaipur this year called Prajakta Kohli, I think her name was something Kohli, and she's a Prajakta, and she sells like yeah hundreds of thousands of copies. So everyone at HarperCollins was treating her like like she's the cash cow we all need. So it's like it was very I mean, there are writers who sell crazy amounts and they can make really good money from their books. But for most of us who are doing it for kind of passion and love, we need some other source of income. So, like I teach, some people work in publishing, some people teach, some people do other stuff. A lot of writers teach. It is, I don't mean to discourage anyone, like I'm just trying to tell you the realities of it, as someone told me, like when Lila came out, I was working in journalism, and I quit actually, and I was nominated for this prize, and I went down to the prize ceremony, and it was the Hindu prize, and the judge was Sebastian Fox. I don't know if you guys. He's a very famous UK writer, and he'd been flown in, and his wife, and they were lovely people, and they were talking, and he read the book. So I mean, he was a judge, so he read it, and so he read all of our work, and he liked it, and he was like, "Man, I'm really impressed by the writing in India and all of that." But get yourself a job, like like don't make this your career, like and I was like, why? If this guy who's so successful is telling me this, then I should really listen in because he'd been teaching for the last 30, 25 years. He lives in London, and he's like, there's no way I would have been able to afford London. And I was like, you have all these kind of global titles, and you're telling me that you need to teach. So then, it was a humbling moment for me because I thought I could like just live on the writing money, and that's not feasible, you know.
Yeah, thank you for that eye-opening. Like everybody struggles with that dilemma, I think, to quit or not to quit the day job.